The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The air carried a slight chill, signaling the arrival of autumn. In a quiet suburban neighborhood, where rows of neatly trimmed lawns stretched as far as the eye could see, Vin Diesel jogged along the sidewalk. His large frame moved with surprising grace, his feet pounding softly against the pavement. He wore a simple black hoodie, sweatpants, and running shoes. A pair of earphones rested snugly in his ears, playing soft music that kept him relaxed. This was his favorite time of day, a moment to clear his mind after long hours of work. Vin wasn't just any ordinary man. He was well known around the world for his movies and larger-than-life personality. But tonight he wasn't thinking about fame or cameras. Tonight he was just another person enjoying the crisp evening air. The streetlights flickered on one by one, casting warm, yellow glows onto the pavement. It was peaceful here, almost serene. For once, Vin felt like he could blend into the background, unnoticed and unbothered. Unbeknownst to him, someone else was watching. Officer Gary Dawson sat in his patrol car at the corner of Maple Street, sipping coffee from a paper cup. Gary was a tall man with broad shoulders and a stern face. His uniform was spotless, but there was something cold in his eyes, something hard that made people uneasy when they crossed paths with him. Gary prided himself on being tough, on keeping order, but over the years he'd earned a reputation for being unnecessarily aggressive, especially toward those who looked different from him. As Vin passed under a street lamp, its light illuminated his muscular build and dark skin. Gary narrowed his eyes. To him, Vin didn't look like anyone who belonged in this part of town. What's he doing here? Gary muttered to himself, leaning forward in his seat. He grabbed the microphone attached to the dashboard and called dispatch. Got a suspicious guy jogging on Maple. Big dude, looks out of place. I'm going to check it out. Gary turned off the engine and stepped out of the car. His boots clicked against the pavement as he approached Vin. The sound caught Vin's attention, and he paused mid-stride, pulling his earphones out. Is everything okay, officer? Vin asked politely, his voice calm and friendly. He offered a small smile, hoping to diffuse whatever concern the man might have. But Gary wasn't interested in pleasantries. Instead of responding, he planted himself directly in Vin's path, blocking his way. Where are you headed? Gary demanded, his tone sharp and accusatory. There was no warmth in his expression, only suspicion. I live nearby, Vin replied, still keeping his tone even. I'm just out for a run. Is there a problem? Gary ignored the question. Instead, he began circling Vin slowly, sizing him up. You don't look like you're from around here, he said, his words laced with disdain. This isn't your neighborhood, is it? Vin frowned slightly, sensing the tension rising. I told you I live close by. If you need proof, I can show you my ID. He reached for the pocket of his hoodie, intending to grab his wallet, but Gary reacted instantly. Keep your hands where I can see them, Gary barked, stepping closer. His hand hovered near the holster on his hip, ready to draw his weapon, if necessary. Vin froze, holding his palms outward to show he meant no harm. Relax, officer, he said, trying to stay composed. I'm not reaching for anything dangerous, just my ID. But Gary wasn't listening. His mind was already made up. To him, Vin was nothing more than a stereotype. A big, intimidating figure who didn't belong in this quiet, predominantly white suburb. Don't give me that crap, Gary snapped. You think I don't know what you're up to? People like you always cause trouble. Vin's jaw tightened. He hated confrontations like this, moments where people judged him based solely on how he looked. Still, he tried to remain patient. People like me? He repeated, raising an eyebrow. What exactly do you mean by that? Gary sneered. You know damn well what I mean. Don't play dumb with me. Now turn around and put your hands on the car. For a brief moment, Vin considered arguing further. He wanted to explain that he was just a regular person trying to enjoy some fresh air. But experience had taught him that arguing with someone like Gary rarely ended well. So instead he complied, turning around and placing his hands on the hood of the patrol car as instructed. The metal felt cold beneath his fingertips. Gary wasted no time. He patted Vin down roughly, searching for anything incriminating. When he found nothing, his frustration grew. "Why are you really here?" he growled, yanking Vin's arms behind his back and slapping handcuffs onto his wrists. "Spill it. What are you hiding?" "I'm not hiding anything," Vin insisted, his voice steady despite the situation. "You've got the wrong guy. I'm telling you, I live here." "Yeah, right," Gary scoffed. "Sure you do, and I'm the Queen of England." He shoved Vin harder, forcing him to lean against the car. "We'll see about that. Let's take a little ride down to the station, shall we?" By now, a small crowd had gathered. Neighbors peered curiously from their windows or stood on their porches whispering among themselves. Some recognized Vin immediately, while others simply watched in confusion. No one dared to intervene, though. Everyone knew Gary's reputation, and crossing him was never a good idea. Just as Gary opened the rear door of the patrol car, preparing to shove Vin inside, a loud screech echoed through the street. Both men turned their heads to see a sleek black SUV skid to a halt behind them. Two figures emerged from the vehicle, dressed in professional attire. One was a woman with short brown hair and piercing green eyes. The other was a tall man with a confident stride and a serious expression. They wore badges clipped to their belts, identifying them as federal agents. "What's going on here, Officer Dawson?" the woman asked sharply, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. She introduced herself as Agent Laura Hayes, while her partner identified himself as Agent Ryan Cole. Their presence commanded respect, and even Gary seemed taken aback. "This doesn't concern you," Gary stammered, trying to regain control of the situation. "I'm handling it." Agent Hayes raised an eyebrow. "Handling what exactly? Arresting a citizen without probable cause." Her gaze shifted to Vin, who met her eyes briefly before looking away. There was a flicker of recognition between them, a silent acknowledgement that went unnoticed by everyone else. Gary hesitated, unsure how to respond. For the first time since the encounter began, doubt crept into his mind. Who were these people? And why were they interfering with his arrest? Little did Gary realize he was about to uncover a truth far greater than he could have imagined, one that would challenge everything he thought he knew. The sleek black SUV stood out against the quiet suburban backdrop, its presence commanding attention. Agent Laura Hayes and Agent Ryan Cole approached Officer Gary Dawson with purposeful strides. Their badges gleamed under the dim glow of the streetlights, leaving no room for doubt about their authority. Gary, still holding Vin Diesel's arm tightly, took a step back, but refused to release his grip. His confidence wavered, replaced by a mix of confusion and irritation. "What's your business here?" Gary asked, his voice louder than necessary. He tried to sound authoritative, but there was an edge of defensiveness that betrayed his unease. "This is my patrol area. I don't need federal agents sticking their noses where they don't belong." "Agent," Hayes crossed her arms, her sharp green eyes locking onto Gary's face. "That's funny," she said coolly, "because what we're seeing looks like misconduct. You've detained this man without probable cause, and now you're trying to justify it. Care to explain yourself?" Gary opened his mouth to argue, but stopped short. The weight of the situation pressed down on him. These weren't ordinary civilians. They were federal agents, people who could make his life difficult if he wasn't careful. Still, pride got the better of him. "He was acting suspiciously," Gary insisted, gesturing toward Vin. "Big guy like him jogging through a residential neighborhood at night doesn't sit right with me." Vin remained silent, leaning slightly against the hood of the patrol car. His expression was calm, almost detached, as though he'd been in situations like this before. To the casual observer, he might have appeared resigned, but those who knew him well would recognize the flicker of calculation in his eyes. He glanced at the agents again, exchanging another subtle nod. It was brief, almost imperceptible, but it spoke volumes. Agent Ryan Cole stepped forward, his towering frame casting a shadow over Gary. "Suspicious how?" Ryan asked, his tone firm yet measured. "Did he break any laws? Did he threaten anyone? Or are you basing your actions solely on assumptions?" Gary hesitated. He glanced at Vin, then back at the agents. searching for some way to salvage the situation. "Look, I've been a cop for 20 years, he said, puffing out his chest. "I know trouble when I see it. And trust me, this guy," he jabbed a finger at Vin, "is trouble." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because all we've seen so far is you harassing a law-abiding citizen. If you have evidence to support your claims, show us, otherwise let him go." A tense silence settled over the group. Neighbors continued to watch from their windows or porches, whispering among themselves. Some recognized Vin immediately, muttering things like, "Isn't that the actor?" Others simply stared, unsure what to make of the bizarre scene unfolding before them. Finally, Gary relented. With an exaggerated sigh, he removed the handcuffs from Vin's wrists. "Fine," he muttered, stepping away. "But don't think this is over." He shot Vin a glare filled with thinly veiled hostility, before turning his attention back to the agents. "Who exactly are you two anyway? What agency do you work for?" "That's classified," Laura replied smoothly, her lips curling into a faint smile. "Let's just say we're here to ensure justice is served, and to remind officers like you that abusing your power has consequences." Gary clenched his jaw but said nothing. For once, he seemed to understand that pushing back would only dig him deeper into trouble. Instead, he retreated to his patrol car, slamming the door shut behind him. The engine roared to life, and within moments he sped off down the street, leaving skid marks on the pavement. As soon as Gary was gone, Laura turned her focus to Vin. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice softening slightly. She studied him closely, noting the faint red marks on his wrists where the handcuffs had dug into his skin. "I'm fine," Vin replied, flexing his hands to shake off the lingering discomfort. "Thanks for showing up when you did. Things could have gotten ugly." Ryan nodded, his expression serious. "We monitor these situations closely. When we saw the report come through dispatch, we knew we had to intervene. Gary Dawson has a history of questionable behavior, and tonight proved our concerns were justified." Vin didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked around at the neighbors who were still watching curiously. Some offered sympathetic smiles or waves, while others quickly disappeared back into their homes. He appreciated their concern, but he also knew that incidents like this were nothing new to him. Over the years, he'd learned to navigate the complexities of fame and prejudice, often finding himself caught between admiration and hostility. "Come on," Laura said gently, motioning toward the SUV. "Let's get out of here. We can talk more back at headquarters." Vin hesitated for a moment, glancing at the crowd one last time. Then, with a small nod, he followed the agents to their vehicle. The doors clicked shut, and the engine purred to life as they drove away from the neighborhood. Inside the SUV, the atmosphere shifted. The tension of the encounter faded, replaced by a sense of familiarity. Laura and Ryan exchanged knowing glances, their professionalism giving way to camaraderie. Vin leaned back in his seat, finally allowing himself to relax. The adrenaline from earlier began to ebb, leaving him drained but alert. "So," Ryan said after a few minutes of silence, "what brings you to this part of town? Not exactly your usual stomping ground." Vin chuckled softly, rubbing the back of his neck. "You'd be surprised how much I blend in when I'm not on set. I bought a house here a while ago. It's peaceful, quiet, perfect for unwinding. After a long day, tonight I just wanted to clear my head." Laura nodded thoughtfully. "Well, unfortunately, blending in isn't always easy. Not for someone like you. People tend to form opinions based on appearances, especially when they don't take the time to look beyond them." "It's nothing new," Vin admitted with a shrug. "I've dealt with it my whole life. Sometimes it's frustrating, sure, but I try not to let it get to me. Still," he trailed off, his gaze fixed on the passing scenery outside the window, "moments like tonight remind me why I signed up for this job in the first place." Ryan arched an eyebrow. "Signed up for what exactly?" "Acting." Vin smirked, shaking his head. "No, well, yes, technically. But I mean the other job. The one you two already know about." Laura and Ryan exchanged another glance, this one tinged with amusement. "Right," Laura said. "Your undercover work. How could we forget?" For the uninitiated, Vin Diesel wasn't just a Hollywood star. Beneath the glitz and glamour of his public persona lay a secret identity, one reserved for high-stakes missions involving national security. As part of a covert federal task force, he used his celebrity status as a cover to infiltrate various circles, gathering intelligence and dismantling threats that most people never even knew existed. It was dangerous work requiring equal parts charisma and caution, but Vin thrived in it. "You're lucky we spotted the report in time," Ryan remarked. "If we hadn't intervened, Gary might have taken you downtown. Can you imagine the headlines? Movie star arrested for jogging." Vin laughed despite himself. "Yeah, that would have been awkward. Thanks again for saving me from that mess." "No problem," Laura said. "It's what we do. Besides, you're too valuable to lose to some small-town cop with a chip on his shoulder." The conversation lulled as the SUV pulled into an underground parking garage beneath a nondescript office building. The structure looked ordinary from the outside, designed to blend seamlessly into its surroundings. But inside, it housed the headquarters of the covert agency Vin worked for, a labyrinth of secure rooms, advanced technology, and highly trained operatives. As they stepped out of the vehicle, Laura led the way to a private elevator. She swiped her badge across a scanner, and the doors slid open with a soft chime. The ride down was smooth and silent, broken only by the hum of machinery. When the doors reopened, they entered a brightly lit corridor lined with reinforced walls and heavy doors marked with coded labels. "This way," Ryan said, guiding Vin toward a briefing room at the end of the hall. Inside, a large table dominated the space, surrounded by chairs and equipped with state-of-the-art screens and communication devices. Laura gestured for Vin to take a seat, while she and Ryan positioned themselves across from him. "All right," Laura began, pulling up files on a nearby tablet. "Let's debrief. What happened tonight was unfortunate, but it gives us an opportunity to dig deeper into Gary Dawson's activities. Based on preliminary intel, he's suspected of having ties to a network of corrupt officers involved in hate crimes and racial profiling." Vin frowned, leaning forward slightly. "How deep does it go?" "That's what we're trying to figure out," Ryan replied. "So far, we've identified several individuals connected to Dawson, including senior officials within the department. They operate under the radar, using their positions to intimidate and manipulate vulnerable communities." "And you think Dawson's part of that?" Vin asked. "We're almost certain of it," Laura confirmed, "which is why your encounter tonight couldn't have come at a better time. With your testimony and possibly cooperation, we can build a stronger case against him and his associates." Vin considered this for a moment. While he understood the importance of bringing corrupt individuals to justice, he also knew the risks involved. Going after powerful figures meant exposing himself to potential retaliation, both personally and professionally. Yet something about this mission resonated with him. The next morning, Vin woke up early, the events of the previous night still fresh in his mind. He stood by the window of his suburban home, sipping a cup of coffee as sunlight streamed through the curtains. Outside, children played on the sidewalk, and birds chirped cheerfully in the trees. It was hard to believe that just hours ago, this same neighborhood had been the stage for such tension and hostility. But Vin knew better than to let appearances fool him. Beneath the surface of this seemingly peaceful suburb lay secrets he was now tasked with uncovering. The thought weighed heavily on him, but it also gave him purpose. For years, he'd balanced his life as an actor and undercover operative, using his fame as both a shield and a tool. Now more than ever, he felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on his shoulders. Later that day, Vin met with agents Laura Hayes and Ryan Cole at a quiet cafe a few miles from headquarters. They sat at a corner table away from prying eyes, their conversation kept low and discreet. Laura spread out several documents across the table, her movements deliberate and precise. "We've dug deeper into Gary Dawson's background," she began, tapping one of the files. "Turns out he's not working alone." Vin leaned forward, studying the papers. There were photographs of Gary meeting with other officers in dimly lit parking lots or secluded alleys. Some of the images were grainy, captured by surveillance cameras, while others were clearer, taken by undercover operatives. Names and dates were scribbled in the margins, connecting dots that painted a disturbing picture. These men, Ryan explained, pointing to a group photo, are part of a network operating within the police department. They call themselves the Order. Sounds dramatic, I know, but they're dangerous. Their goal is to maintain control over certain neighborhoods by intimidating anyone who doesn't fit their idea of belonging. And Gary? Vin asked, his voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. He's one of their enforcers, Laura replied. Not the leader, but high enough in the ranks to carry out orders without question. From what we've gathered, he targets minorities, immigrants, and anyone else he deems a threat to their so-called order. Vin clenched his jaw. The pieces were falling into place, and the truth was uglier than he'd imagined. So what's the plan? He asked after a moment. How do we take them down? Laura exchanged a glance with Ryan before answering. We need evidence, solid proof that ties Gary and his associates to specific crimes. That means infiltrating their circle, gathering intel, and building a case strong enough to bring them all down. And you want me to help, Vin said, finishing her thought. Exactly, Ryan confirmed. Your position gives you unique access. People underestimate you because of your celebrity status. They don't expect someone like you to be involved in something like this. We can use that to our advantage. Vin nodded slowly, considering the risks. Going undercover wasn't new to him, but this assignment carried extra weight. These weren't ordinary criminals. They were corrupt officers, sworn to protect the public. Betraying that trust made them even more dangerous and unpredictable. Still, he couldn't turn away. Not when innocent lives were at stake. All right, Vin said finally. I'm in. What's the first step? Over the next few days, Vin immersed himself in the mission. He attended community events, mingling with locals and subtly steering conversations toward topics like safety and law enforcement. At a farmer's market, he struck up a chat with Mia Johnson, a young mother pushing a stroller. Her face lit up when she recognized him, and she thanked him for his movies, saying they always cheered her up after long days of work. I hear you live around here, Mia said, adjusting the blanket draped over her sleeping baby. It's nice to see celebrities settling down in places like this. Feels real, you know. Vin smiled warmly. Yeah, it does. I like being close to people who remind me why I do what I do. Their conversation turned serious when Mia mentioned recent incidents involving aggressive policing. It's scary, she admitted, lowering her voice. My brother got pulled over last week for no reason. Just because he drives an older car and has tattoos. The officer treated him like a criminal even though he hasn't done anything wrong. Vin listened intently, nodding sympathetically. Stories like Mia's reinforced why this mission mattered. Corruption didn't just affect individuals, it eroded trust in entire communities. By the end of their talk, Vin promised to look into the issue further, careful not to reveal too much about his involvement. Meanwhile, Laura and Ryan worked tirelessly behind the scenes, piecing together information from informants and digital footprints. They discovered that the Order held secret meetings every Friday night at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Surveillance footage showed members arriving in unmarked cars, their faces obscured by hoods or caps. Breaking into their inner circle would require finesse and patience. To prepare, Vin spent hours reviewing profiles of key players, memorizing details about their habits and weaknesses. One name stood out, Officer Carl Myers, a mid-level enforcer known for his loose lips and fondness for cheap whiskey. According to Laura, Carl often bragged about his exploits during late-night drinking sessions at a dive bar called the Rusty Nail. That Friday evening, Vin found himself sitting at the bar, nursing a glass of soda water. The Rusty Nail was exactly, as its name suggested, a grimy establishment with flickering neon lights and sticky floors. Country music blared from a jukebox in the corner, blending with the sound of rowdy laughter and clinking glasses. Vin kept his hoodie pulled low over his face, ensuring he remained inconspicuous. Carl arrived an hour later, stumbling slightly as he pushed open the door. His uniform was wrinkled, and his breath reeked of alcohol even before he reached the bar. Vin flagged down the bartender and ordered another round, sliding the drink toward Carl with a friendly smile. "Rough night, huh?" he asked casually. Carl squinted at him, clearly trying to place the face. "Do I know you?" he slurred. "Not really," Vin replied with a shrug. "Just passing through, thought I'd grab a drink." Carl accepted the explanation without question, too drunk to care. As the night wore on, Vin coaxed him into talking, feigning interest in his stories. At first, Carl rambled about mundane things, traffic tickets, unruly teenagers, but eventually he started boasting about his role in keeping the streets safe. "You wouldn't believe some of the scum we deal with," Carl said, leaning closer. His words slurred together, but Vin caught every syllable. "People think we're just regular cops, but we're doing God's work. Cleaning up the trash, you know? Making sure only the right kind of people stay in power." Vin nodded, masking his disgust with a neutral expression. "Sounds tough. How do you decide who's trash and who isn't?" Carl smirked, clearly pleased with himself. "Easy. If they don't belong, they stick out like a sore thumb. Like that big guy last night, the actor dude. Totally out of place. Good thing Gary spotted him." Vin's heart skipped a beat, but he forced himself to remain calm. "Oh yeah? What happened?" "Gary roughed him up a bit, taught him a lesson," Carl said with a chuckle. "But then those feds showed up and ruined everything. Stupid busybodies sticking their noses where they don't belong." Vin resisted the urge to react. Instead, he steered the conversation back to the warehouse meetings, pretending curiosity. "Sounds like you guys are pretty organized. Where do you meet up? Somewhere secure, I hope." Carl hesitated, suddenly wary. "Why do you want to know?" "No reason," Vin said quickly, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Just curious, sounded cool, that's all." Fortunately, Carl was too intoxicated to dwell on it. He shrugged and muttered something about old warehouses before ordering another drink. By the time Vin left the bar, he had enough information to confirm the location of the next meeting. Back at headquarters, he relayed everything to Laura and Ryan. "We've got a shot," he told them, his tone urgent. "If we can get inside that warehouse, we might be able to record incriminating conversations, or even catch them red-handed." Laura nodded, her expression grim. "It's risky, but worth it. Let's move forward carefully. One wrong step, and they'll shut us out completely." As the team finalized plans for the operation, Vin couldn't shake the image of Carl's smug grin or Mia's worried expression. This wasn't just about taking down a corrupt network anymore. It was personal. Every insult, every act of prejudice, fueled his determination to see justice served. And so, with renewed resolve, Vin prepared for the most dangerous phase of the mission yet. Little did he know, the challenges ahead would test not only his skills, but also his faith in humanity. The night of the warehouse meeting arrived, and Vin Diesel felt a mix of anticipation and unease as he prepared for the operation. Dressed in dark, nondescript clothing, he checked his gear one last time before heading out. A tiny microphone was tucked discreetly under his shirt collar, connected to a transmitter hidden in his pocket. Laura and Ryan had equipped him with everything he needed to document the meeting without raising suspicion. "You ready?" Laura asked, her voice steady but tinged with concern. She stood beside Ryan in the dimly lit briefing room, their expressions serious. Both agents knew the risks involved. This wasn't just another routine mission. The stakes were higher than ever. "As ready as I'll ever be," Vin replied, forcing a confident smile. He adjusted the strap of his backpack, which contained a small camera disguised as an ordinary flashlight. "Just make sure you're close by if things go south." Ryan nodded firmly. "We'll be monitoring everything from the van. If anything feels off, signal us immediately. We'll extract you before they can react." With that, Vin stepped into the cool night air, his breath visible in the crisp autumn breeze. The drive to the warehouse took longer than expected, giving him plenty of time to think about what might happen inside. Would Gary Dawson or Carl Myers recognize him? Could he maintain his cover long enough to gather the evidence they needed? These questions swirled in his mind, but he pushed them aside, focusing instead on the task ahead. When he reached the outskirts of town, the landscape changed dramatically. The suburban houses gave way to empty fields and crumbling buildings, remnants of a once thriving industrial area. The warehouse loomed in the distance, its silhouette jagged against the starless sky. Faint lights flickered through cracks in the boarded-up windows, casting eerie shadows on the ground. Vin parked his car a safe distance away and approached the building on foot, careful to stay out of sight. He could hear muffled voices coming from inside, along with the occasional clink of glass or metal. Taking a deep breath, he slipped through a side door left slightly ajar. Inside, the air smelled damp and musty, thick with dust and decay. Rows of rusted machinery lined the walls, creating makeshift hiding spots between towering stacks of crates. At the far end of the warehouse, a group of men gathered around a folding table, illuminated by a single hanging bulb. Vin recognized Gary, Dawson instantly, his broad frame unmistakable even in the dim light. Carl Myers sat nearby, nursing a bottle of whiskey while others leaned in close, engaged in heated conversation. Vin lingered near the edge of the crowd, pretending to inspect. Some tools scattered across a workbench. His heart pounded in his chest, but he kept his movements slow and deliberate, avoiding any sudden gestures that might draw attention. From his vantage point, he could hear fragments of their discussion. "We can't afford mistakes like last week," one man growled, slamming his fist on the table. "Those feds are sniffing around again. If anyone talks, we're all screwed." Gary nodded grimly. "I told you guys, they're watching us. That actor guy was bad enough, but now they've got people following our every move." Someone tipped them off. Carl hiccuped loudly, earning a glare from the others. "Relax, will ya? Nobody's gonna talk. Besides, who cares about some washed-up celebrity? He probably forgot all about it already." Vin clenched his fists, resisting the urge to step forward and confront them. Instead, he activated the hidden camera in his backpack, angling it toward the group. The device whirred softly as it recorded their faces and voices, capturing every word they spoke. "Enough about him," another man interjected, his tone sharp. "What about the Johnson family? They've been causing trouble lately. Complaining to the mayor, filing complaints against us. We need to send a message." Gary smirked, leaning back in his chair. "Already taken care of. My buddy over at City Hall is handling it. Trust me, they won't be making noise much longer." A chill ran down Vin's spine. He'd met Mia Johnson just days ago, and now he realized how vulnerable she and her family truly were. These men weren't just corrupt officers, they were predators preying on those too afraid to fight back. Determined to protect them, Vin edged closer, straining to catch more details. As the meeting dragged on, tensions among the group grew palpable. Arguments broke out over strategy, resources, and loyalty. It became clear that not everyone shared the same level of commitment to the order. Some seemed hesitant, glancing nervously at each other as though waiting for an opportunity to leave. Seizing the moment, Vin whispered into his microphone, updating Laura and Ryan on the situation. "They're divided," he murmured softly. "If we play this right, we might be able to turn them against each other." "Good work," Laura replied through his earpiece. "Keep recording. We'll analyze the footage later and decide our next move." Just then Gary stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the concrete floor. "Enough chit-chat," he barked, silencing the room. "We've got bigger problems to deal with. Word is there's a rat in our ranks, someone feeding info to the feds." The announcement sent a ripple of unease through the group. Men exchanged suspicious glances, whispering accusations under their breaths. Vin froze, suddenly aware that he might have drawn unwanted attention. He forced himself to remain calm, pretending to tinker with a nearby toolbox. "I don't trust anyone here," Gary continued, pacing back and forth. "Not until we find out who's leaking information. So listen up. If anyone sees something strange, report it immediately. No exceptions." Carl raised his hand drunkenly, slurring his words. "What if it's one of us? What if someone here is the rat?" Gary stopped mid-step, his eyes narrowing dangerously. For a moment it seemed like he might explode in anger. Instead he let out a low laugh, shaking his head. "If I find out who it is, they won't live long enough to regret it." The threat hung heavy in the air, sending shivers down Vin's spine. He knew he couldn't stay much longer without risking exposure. Slowly, he began backing toward the exit, keeping his movements casual and unhurried. Just as he reached the doorway, a loud crash echoed through the warehouse. A stack of crates had toppled over, startling everyone. What was that? One of the men shouted, jumping to his feet. Probably nothing, Gary muttered, though his hand instinctively went to his holster. Still, check it out. Better safe than sorry. Vin seized the distraction, slipping outside and disappearing into the shadows. Once he was a safe distance away, he signaled Laura and Ryan, letting them know he was clear. Moments later, the surveillance van pulled up beside him, its doors sliding open. How did it go? Ryan asked urgently, helping Vin climb inside. They're paranoid, Vin replied, catching his breath. But I got what we needed, enough to bring them all down. Laura reviewed the footage on a laptop screen, her expression growing darker with each passing second. This is worse than we thought. There's no doubt these men are guilty. Now we just need to figure out how to use this evidence effectively. Over the next few days, the team worked tirelessly, piecing together the recordings and cross-referencing them with existing intel. They identified key players within the order and mapped out their connections to higher-ups in the police department. Armed with irrefutable proof, they presented their findings to federal prosecutors, who agreed to file charges against Gary Dawson and his associates. Meanwhile, Vin paid a visit to Mia Johnson, determined to warn her about the danger she and her family faced. Sitting in her cozy living room surrounded by photos of smiling children and handmade crafts, he explained the situation carefully, assuring her that protective measures would be put in place. Mia listened quietly, tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice trembling. "For everything. Most people wouldn't bother sticking their necks out for strangers like us." Vin smiled gently, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "That's where you're wrong. People like you are the reason I do what I do. You deserve to feel safe in your own home." By the time the arrests were made, news of the corruption scandal spread quickly, sparking outrage across the community. Officers implicated in the order were stripped of their badges and charged with multiple counts of misconduct. Gary Dawson, once proud and unyielding, broke down during questioning, revealing names and secrets in exchange for leniency. Though justice had been served, Vin couldn't shake the weight of what he'd witnessed. Corruption like this didn't happen overnight. It festered in silence, nurtured by fear and indifference. As he jogged through his neighborhood the following evening, he resolved to keep fighting, using his platform to shine a light on injustice wherever it lurked. Because sometimes being a hero meant more than saving the day. Sometimes it meant standing up when no one else would, even if it came at a cost. The weeks following the arrests were a whirlwind of activity. News outlets buzzed with stories about the order, dissecting every detail of the corruption scandal that had rocked the suburban community. Headlines blared accusations while talk shows debated whether systemic issues within law enforcement could ever truly be fixed. For many residents, it was a wake-up call, a stark reminder that danger often lurked where least expected. Vin Diesel watched the coverage unfold from his living room, flipping through channels with a mix of satisfaction and unease. On one hand, he felt proud of what they'd accomplished. Gary Dawson and his associates were behind bars, their crimes exposed for the world to see. On the other hand, Vin couldn't shake the feeling that this victory was only temporary. Corruption wasn't confined to one neighborhood or one group of officers. It was a deeper, more insidious problem that required constant vigilance. Still, there were moments of hope. One afternoon, as Vin walked through the local park, he noticed neighbors chatting openly about the scandal. Some expressed anger, others relief, but all agreed that change was necessary. A young boy approached him shyly, holding out a crumpled piece of paper. "Can I have your autograph?" the child asked, his eyes wide with admiration. Vin smiled, warmly, signing the paper before kneeling down to meet the boy's gaze. "Sure thing, buddy, but remember something. What really matters isn't fame or money. It's standing up for what's right even when it's hard." The boy nodded solemnly, clutching the signed paper like a treasure. His mother thanked Vin graciously, mentioning how much her son looked up to him. As Vin continued his walk, he realized that these small interactions mattered just as much as any high-stakes mission. They reminded him why he chose this path, to inspire others to believe in justice, fairness, and kindness. Meanwhile, Laura Hayes and Ryan Cole worked tirelessly to ensure the investigation led to meaningful reform. Together with federal prosecutors, they pushed for sweeping changes within the police department, including stricter accountability measures, mandatory bias training, and independent oversight committees. Their efforts weren't met without resistance. Some officials argued that such reforms would weaken law enforcement, while others claimed they went too far. But Laura and Ryan stood firm, determined to break the cycle of abuse. One evening, after a particularly grueling meeting, Laura joined Vin at a quiet diner near headquarters. She slid into the booth across from him, looking exhausted but resolute. "It's going to take time," she admitted, stirring sugar into her coffee. "Changing systems like this doesn't happen overnight, but we're making progress." Vin nodded thoughtfully. "Progress is good. Better than nothing anyway. Still, it feels like we're fighting an uphill battle sometimes." "That's because we are," Laura replied with a wry smile. "But you know what keeps me going? People like you. You don't have to do this. You could live a comfortable life staying out of trouble. But instead, you choose to make a difference. That means something." Her words resonated deeply with Vin. He'd always known his work carried risks, but hearing someone acknowledge its value made him feel less alone. "Thanks," he said softly. "I needed to hear that." As they talked, the conversation turned toward Gary Dawson. Since his arrest, Gary had cooperated extensively with investigators, providing names and details in exchange for reduced charges. While some viewed his actions as cowardly, others saw them as a glimmer of redemption. During questioning, Gary confessed that his behavior stemmed from years of unchecked prejudice and fear, a toxic combination amplified by the power of his badge. "He's not innocent," Ryan said later, joining them at the diner. "But he's not entirely evil either, just lost. Maybe this experience will force him to confront who he really is." Vin considered this for a moment. Though he harbored no sympathy for Gary's actions, he understood the complexity of human nature. Everyone carried flaws, insecurities, and biases. What set people apart was whether they chose to acknowledge those flaws and work to overcome them. A few days later, Vin attended a charity event organized by Mia Johnson. The gathering took place at a community center decorated with colorful banners and twinkling fairy lights. Families mingled happily, sharing food and laughter as children played games in the corner. It was a stark contrast to the tension and fear that had gripped the neighborhood just weeks earlier. Mia greeted Vin warmly, introducing him to friends and neighbors eager to thank him for his role in exposing the order. Each handshake and hug reinforced the impact of his work, not just on individuals but on the entire community. As the evening wore on, Vin found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. When the organizers invited him to speak, Vin stepped onto a small stage, microphone in hand. The crowd fell silent, their attention focused solely on him. For a moment he hesitated, unsure how to convey everything he'd learned. Then, taking a deep breath, he began. "I'm not here to talk about myself," he said, his voice steady and sincere. "I'm here to remind each of you of something important. None of us are defined solely by our mistakes or by the judgments others place on us. We all have the power to choose who we want to be, to stand up for what's right, even when it's scary, to listen to one another, learn from each other, and grow together." His words struck a chord, earning murmurs of agreement from the audience. When he finished speaking, applause erupted, filling the room with warmth and unity. As Vin stepped off the stage, Mia hugged him tightly, tears glistening in her eyes. "You've given us hope," she whispered. "Thank you." Later that night, as Vin jogged through the same streets where his ordeal had begun, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. The neighborhood seemed different now, brighter, more alive. Neighbors waved as he passed, their smiles genuine and welcoming. In the distance, he spotted Gary Dawson sitting on a bench, staring blankly at the pavement. Their eyes met briefly, and for a fleeting moment Vin saw something unexpected in Gary's expression. Not hostility, but regret. Without saying a word, Vin nodded slightly before continuing on his way. Though their paths might never cross again, Vin knew that Gary's story wasn't over. Redemption was possible, even for those who had strayed far from the light. And perhaps, in time, Gary would find his own way back. As the cool night air enveloped him, Vin allowed himself a rare moment of contentment. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but he was ready to face whatever challenges lay in store. Because in the end, it wasn't about perfection. It was about perseverance, about choosing day after day to fight for a better world. And that, Vin realized, was worth every step.